Welcome to 40k Dataslate Review. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the Astra Militarum vehicle, the Shadowsword. Astra Militarum are known for their big tanks, and they don't get much bigger than the Shadowsword. A Baneblade variant starting with a 10-inch move, and diminishes quite a bit as it takes wounds. Speaking of which, it has 26 wounds, toughness 8, and a 3-up save, so this thing can take a beating. Before getting into the main draw of this tank, let's briefly discuss its combat potential. It has a surprising 9 attacks at full strength, but hits on 5s. The tank also comes with a melee weapon. Adamantium tracks grant AP-2 and D3 damage attacks. Not only that, but because of its Steel Behemoth ability, the model can still fire its weapons while engaged in combat, so unlike many other Astra Militarum tanks, it is not always best to try to tie it up in combat. The Shadowsword's arsenal is one of the best in 40k. By default, it comes equipped with the Volcano Cannon and a twin heavy bolter. The Volcano Cannon is pure insanity. 120-inch, heavy 3d3, strength 16, AP-5, 2d6 damage. This gun is bananas. If this weapon looks good for taking out super heavy targets, you're right, because it also rerolls failed wound rolls against Titanic units, and the Shadowsword itself always adds 1 to hit rolls against Titanic units. The Volcano Cannon is likely going to be killing that super heavy vehicle or monster in a single go if it doesn't have an invulnerable save. Along with these weapons, the tank can also be equipped with a Hunter Killer Missile, a one-use only single-shot D6 damage weapon. I normally wouldn't recommend paying for this weapon unless you have that many points left over and nothing else to do with them. In addition, the tank can bring either a Stormbolter or a Heavy Stubber, offering a few shots without AP. Again, I'd skip these. The weapons that really may come in handy are its 2 to 4 sets of sponsons equipped with a las cannon. Each sponson also bears either a twin heavy bolter or twin heavy flamer. If the player has the points, grabbing the extra weapons here takes this weapon from destroying a single target effectively to taking out multiple targets effectively in each shooting phase. The 4 las cannons and volcano cannon will obviously blow holes in the enemy's army, but think about those 5 twin heavy bolters. 30 strength 5 AP1 attacks will eviscerate infantry. The twin heavy flamers will also cut through enemy infantry, but the tank really shouldn't be getting that close. Maybe take 1 or 2 for a bit of an Overwatch deterrent. Don't worry about any of these weapons being heavy. One of the other benefits of Steel Behemoth is ignoring the penalty for moving and shooting a heavy weapon. I suppose the mediocre 4-up ballistic skill is supposed to keep this thing in check, and as it takes damage, it lowers in accuracy even more. The model also has smoke launchers to give it -1 to hit against enemy shooting, but it also has to sacrifice alt shooting for a phase, so it will likely be overlooked. At bare minimum, the vehicle costs just over 400 points, and with its extra sponsons, it could cost well over 500 points, so this thing is quite a chunk of points. Make sure the rest of the army complements it well, since it is likely around a quarter of your army. Generally, the Astra Militarum player will keep their Shadowsword behind a few rows of guardsman chaff. Try to keep the tank at about 36 inches away for as long as possible. The vehicle is likely going to be in a separate, super heavy detachment anyway, so choosing the regimental doctrines best suited for this vehicle seems ideal, even if it isn't the same regiment as the rest of the army. Cadian Shadowswords make up somewhat for the middling accuracy by allowing the vehicle to reroll 1s to hit in the shooting phase, if it sat still in the prior movement phase. Not only that, but for 2 CP, its stratagem, Overlapping Fields of Fire, could also increase the model's accuracy. Use the stratagem after wounding a model in the shooting phase, add 1 to the hit rolls for all attacks directed at that target for the rest of the phase. Allowing the tank to hit on 3s with reroll 1s makes it all the more deadly. The Vostroyan Regimental Doctrine would benefit the Shadowsword a bit by increasing heavy weapon ranges by 6 inches. The Regiment stratagem would also be effective with the Shadowsword. For 1 CP, it increases to hit rolls. The regiment the Shadowsword has been seen in lately in the current tournament meta has been Talarn. Because the Shadowsword will have a huge target on its back, and many enemies will target it first turn, it can be important to hide it from a powerful alpha strike, albeit less common now with the current FAQ. The regiment's stratagem allows the tank to set up in reserves and deploy 9 inches from an enemy and 7 inches from a board edge. This stratagem ensures the player gets at least 1 turn to shoot with it before the enemy puts everything they have into killing it. The regimental doctrines provide a mild boost in that they make the tank's heavy weapons assault weapons, allowing it to advance and shoot if it didn't have range or line of sight already. Outside of regiments, there are also other Astra Militarum units that synergize with the Shadowsword. In Acadian Force, the Shadowsword would have access to Commissar Yarick, who allows models within 6 inches to reroll hit rolls. This has a somewhat mild buff, seeing as Acadian models already reroll ones to hit if they sit still. But when this buff may come in handy is when the Shadowsword gets in combat. Melee is not always a place the Shadowsword wants to be, but it will find itself there sometimes. And rerolling to hits will make up a bit for that 5-up weapon skill. Also in Acadian Force, a player would have access to the Relic of Lost Cadia. Use this item once per game and reroll to hit and wound rolls of 1 for units within 12 inches of the bearer. This could give the Shadowsword quite a potent round of shooting. Sergeant Harker to Catachan is what Commissar Yarick is to Cadia, but in this case, he only allows reroll 1s to hit in the shooting phase. A player can also place a Tech Priest Engine Seer near the Shadowsword to heal it D3 wounds at the end of each movement phase. If the Engine Seer was inside an Adeptus Mechanicus detachment, the model would be able to heal the tank twice with a stratagem called Tech Adept. Speaking of stratagems, there are a few to use with the Shadowsword. Crush Them is the first on the list, and allows the model to advance and charge, and hit on 2s in the following combat phase. This is kind of nice in a Talon regiment since the tank can advance and shoot. If for nothing other than the shock factor, an Astra Militarum player could advance the giant tank 10 plus d6 inches, then shoot, charge, and hit on 2s. The stratagem Jury Rigging would heal a single wound back to the tank if it doesn't move in any way. Healing 1 wound on a 26 wound model is pretty pointless unless it is to bump the model up on the damage table. When this circumstance does present itself, it is well worth its sacrifice. In the case the Astra Militarum player is using the previously described tactic with an Admech Engine Seer, altogether the Shadowsword could be healing back up to 7 wounds a turn. Defensive Gunners is a 1 CP stratagem that is well worth it. When the Shadowsword is charged, use its ability to overwatch on 5s instead of 6s. This effectively doubles the amount of shots landing and really deters the enemy from charging into your Steel Behemoth. Astra Militarum also has its own Psychic Discipline, and one of their spells adds 1 to saving rolls for the Shadowsword, making for a formidable 2-up save. Night Shroud is a psychic power that can be used to grant the model a -1 penalty to be hit in the shooting phase, further protecting your investment. Astra Militarum synergies just keep coming, and next we'll take a look at a Warlord trait that comes in handy. Grand Strategist is probably the only trait you'll ever see a Guard player use, so you best know it. It grants the Astra Militarum player a die roll every time they spend a command point. On a 5-up, that CP is immediately refunded. This is really great, but not the reason I mention it here. The first part of the ability says that it also allows the player to reroll a hit, wound, or saving throw. This can be applied to the Shadowsword itself to ensure it wounds its target and still saves a command reroll for the damage roll of the Volcano Cannon. The Shadowsword doesn't just fit in an Astra Militarum or Soup army, the tanks surprisingly show up in Genestealer cult armies as well. In the recent 2018 Adepticon 40k champs, the Shadowsword was accompanied by some Flyrant spam in a few players' lists. Once the Genestealer cult codex is out, I'm sure there will be plenty of additional synergies with the Shadowsword, but we'll have to wait until then. The Shadowsword fits into quite a few armies, and since Astra Militarum HQs are so cheap, a Supreme Command detachment to fit the Shadowsword in may be beneficial. The Shadowsword variant of the Baneblade is cropping up quite a bit in the current tournament meta, because it is durable and decimates army in a single shooting phase. It does have some weaknesses though. It starts with a 4-up to hit, and it really doesn't get that much better against normal units, other than the rerolling to hit rolls of 1. This means that units that are -1, 2, or even 3 to hit in the shooting phase will be well protected from the Volcano Cannon. Something to become familiar with when facing the Shadowsword is its damage table. After suffering 13 wounds, it hits on 5s, and after being dealt 20 wounds, it hits on 6s. This still is not an easy accomplishment, but this does quickly neuter the model's giant cannon. Be sure to remember the model can heal, so it may not be safe to leave it near a damage threshold. Since the model is sitting back pretty far most of the time, it shouldn't be too difficult for some of your models to get out of line of sight, or at least get a cover save which may possibly protect your models. The Shadowsword receives a 5 out of 5. It is super durable and deletes a unit or 2 depending on how it is equipped. Not only that, but Astra Militarum have plenty of ways to augment its abilities. In my opinion, the only reasons it isn't really dominating the meta right now is because -1 and -2 to hit models are quite common, and super heavy models are not extremely prevalent, meaning the Volcano Cannon doesn't always have good targets. What do you think of the Shadowsword? What other data slates would you like to see reviewed? Leave your thoughts, suggestions, and answers in the comments below, and thanks for watching.